The moment I stepped into that oak-paneled office, I knew we weren't welcome. My sister Laura's voice cut through the heavy silence like a knife. "You really showed up?" She smirked, swirling her wine glass. "Don't bother sitting. Grandpa left you nothing. He couldn't stand you by the end." Next to me, Emma's small hand tightened around mine. My 10-year-old daughter, in her little blue dress, stood straighter than anyone in that room. She didn't flinch when Uncle Jack chuckled. Even the kid knows her mom's a lost cause. The lawyer, Mr. Bennett, adjusted his glasses and opened the will. I held my breath. "To my beloved granddaughter Laura, I leave the estate and controlling shares." Laura's triumphant glance made my stomach twist, but then Emma tugged my sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, pulling a yellowed envelope from her pocket. "Grandpa gave me this. He said to open it if they were mean to you." The room froze, because scrawled across the front, in shaky handwriting none of them could fake, were Grandpa's words. "For the lawyer's eyes only, when the wolves show their teeth." And just like that, the game changed. The envelope trembled in my hands as the weight of decades of family history pressed down on me. Laura's mocking laughter echoed through the wood-paneled study, her crimson nails tapping impatiently against the armrest of our grandfather's favorite leather chair. "Really, Sarah? You're still trying to play this game?" She sneered, swirling her bourbon. The ice cubes clinked like tiny bells ringing my failure. "Grandpa saw you for what you are years ago." I felt Emma's small fingers tighten around mine. My sweet girl, who shouldn't have had to witness this, who shouldn't know how cruel family could be. The truth was, I hadn't wanted to come today. The formal invitation from Bennett and Sons had arrived 2 weeks after the funeral, the crisp linen paper smelling faintly of the sandalwood cologne Grandpa always wore. I'd nearly thrown it away until Emma found it. "We have to go, Mommy," she'd insisted with that quiet wisdom children sometimes have. Grandpa told me it was important. At the time, I'd assumed she was just imagining things. Now, watching Mr. Bennett carefully examine the yellowed envelope my daughter had produced, I realized how wrong I'd been. I grew up in this house, though you'd never know it now. The Thompson legacy stretched back generations in Charleston. Timber, shipping, then oil when my grandfather saw the future. We weren't just wealthy. We were old money, with all the expectations that came with it. My earliest memory is of standing on a stool in grandfather's study while he taught me how to balance the family ledger. "Numbers don't lie, Sarah girl," he'd say in that gravelly voice. Unlike people. I was supposed to take over the business. That was the plan from the moment I could hold a calculator. Then came college and James Whitmore III and the pregnancy test that changed everything. "You'll terminate it," Father had said, not looking up from his newspaper. "The Whitmore merger depends on this marriage." When I refused, when I chose my unborn child over the family empire, the door didn't just close. It slammed. I spent my last night in this house listening to movers pack my childhood bedroom while Father dictated a press release about my extended European studies. The years that followed were harder than I'd ever admit. Teaching high school economics by day, grading papers by night in our tiny apartment. Watching from afar as Laura took my place at the company, as my cousin's children grew up together at the family compound. Emma asked about them sometimes. "Why don't we see Grandma and Grandpa like other kids do?" I never knew what to say. Then, 6 months ago, the calls started. Always when Emma was at school. Grandpa's number flashing on my screen, his voice weaker each time. "You're still my Sarah girl," he'd say, then hang up before I could respond. I thought it was the dementia people whispered about. Now, watching Mr. Bennett carefully slit open the envelope, I understood. He'd been trying to tell me something. "Mom," Emma whispered, pressing close. "Grandpa said this was for when the mean people came out? Are they mean people?" Across the room, Laura's perfect facade cracked. "How dare you bring that child here to—" "Miss Thompson," Mr. Bennett interrupted, holding up a single sheet of paper. His hands shook slightly. "Your grandfather included a codicil, dated 3 weeks before his passing." The air left my lungs. 3 weeks ago, after all those calls, after a lifetime of silence. Emma squeezed my hand as the lawyer cleared his throat. To my granddaughter Sarah, he read, who was always the strongest of us all. The room erupted before he could finish. Chairs screeched, voices overlapped, but all I could see was Emma's smile, the same stubborn tilt Grandpa's used to have when he knew he'd won. Somewhere beneath the chaos, I heard the clatter of metal on wood. A small silver key skittered across the table, stopping just inches from my trembling fingers. Mr. Bennett met my eyes over the pandemonium. "There's more," he mouthed. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't about the will at all. This was Grandpa's last game, and Emma and I were the only players who knew the rules. The study smelled like polished mahogany and old secrets. Texas heat simmered outside, but inside the Thompson estate, the air felt cold. Not from the air conditioning, but from the people seated around that massive oak table. Grandfather's portrait hung above the fireplace, larger than life, stern and watchful. I used to sit on his lap in this very room, tracing the lines in his hands while he whispered tales of oil rigs and ambition. Now, his painted gaze watched us all, judging, calculating, waiting. Mr. Bennett, the family's long-standing attorney, sat at the head of the table, a thick leather briefcase resting beside him. His white mustache twitched with every movement. Emma and I sat toward the far end, near the French doors. I could see the garden beyond them. Wild now, overgrown. Just like the family that once cared for it. Laura lounged like a queen, one stiletto heel dangling from her manicured toes. Uncle Jack puffed on an unlit cigar. No smoking in the study, but he always needed a prop. My cousin Will scrolled through his phone, barely hiding his boredom. No one had spoken to me since I arrived. Not even a nod. Mr. Bennett cleared his throat, pulling a sheaf of papers from his case. "Michael Thompson's final testament," he began. "Dated 3 weeks prior to his passing, signed in accordance with the laws of the state of Texas, and witnessed by 2 parties whose affidavits I have on record." A hush settled. Even Laura leaned forward slightly. "I'll begin with primary beneficiaries," he continued, adjusting his glasses. "To my beloved daughter, Laura Thompson, 60% of all financial assets, excluding trust-held properties." Laura's smile stretched like fresh plastic. "To my brother, Jack Thompson, 30%, including shares of Thompson Oil Group and exclusive hunting rights to the Montana ranch." Jack grunted approval. I could see the numbers running in his head, calculating resale value. I braced myself for the next name. Emma's hand curled around mine. My heart thudded in my chest. "And to Sarah Thompson," Mr. Bennett paused. The silence that followed was deafening. No designation. For a moment, I didn't breathe. Then Laura laughed, full-throated, cruel. "Oh, Sarah," she said, wiping a fake tear from the corner of her eye. "You didn't really think, after everything, that he'd leave you anything?" Jack chuckled too. Even Will smirked behind his screen. My ears rang, my vision blurred, but not from tears, from fury. I wanted to scream, to remind them I was his granddaughter too, that I used to sit on his lap in this very room. But I didn't. Because just then, Emma stood up. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an envelope, worn, creased, yellowing at the edges. "I think Grandpa wanted you to read this," she said, walking up to Mr. Bennett. The laughter stopped. She placed it in the lawyer's hand. Even from across the room, I could see the words scribbled on the front, in my grandfather's handwriting. "To be opened only if my family forgets what fairness means." Mr. Bennett stared at it for a long time. His face paled. Slowly, reverently, he broke the seal. He read in silence for a full minute. Then he stood. "This," he said, holding the page up, "is a posthumous directive from Mr. Thompson, a conditional addendum to be activated only if certain behaviors were exhibited at the will reading." Laura scoffed. "What, is this a joke?" "It's in his handwriting," Mr. Bennett said calmly. "Witnessed and notarized. Dated 3 weeks before his death." That date again. 3 weeks. He'd called me then, his voice scratchy and weak, but urgent. I hadn't understood it at the time. Now I did. Mr. Bennett continued reading aloud. If you are reading this, it means my fears have been realized. I hoped my family would remember decency, compassion, especially for Sarah and Emma. If they failed, then I hereby enact the following revisions, stored under Directive Codex 214-B, lodged with my private legal counsel and recorded in video. He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a USB drive. The silver glint of it caught the light like a blade. I have instructions to play this now, he said. Absolutely not. Laura stood. This is manipulation. He was senile. There's no way any of this is legal. Sit down, Laura, Mr. Bennett said, in a tone that brooked no argument. To my surprise, she did. The lawyer walked over to the desk and plugged the drive into a small media setup built into the cabinet. Grandfather's design, no doubt. A screen flickered to life. And there he was, Grandpa, sitting in this very room, dressed in one of his trademark vests, holding a mug of coffee. He looked thinner, older, but his eyes were sharp. If you're watching this, then you're acting like jackals, he began flatly. Let me guess. Laura's already counting her shares. Jack's making offers on his next boat, and no one's even looked at Sarah. Laura bristled. Jack looked away. Let me make this real simple. I made a mistake. A big one. I thought I had time to fix it. I don't. He sighed. Sarah gave up everything for that little girl, for Emma. While the rest of you were squabbling over board seats and dinner reservations, she was out there earning every cent on her own. He leaned forward in the video, eyes intense. So here's the real will. Sarah inherits the main house, the Hill Country estate, and the savings account under the name Elm Root Trust. That includes the mineral rights, the Arizona land, and $2 million in liquid assets. My jaw dropped. Laura and Jack, you still get something. I'm not without mercy. But if you even think about contesting this, my lawyer has explicit orders to launch a full investigation into Thompson Group's last 10 years of financial records. Let's not pretend you're all innocent. Laura's mouth fell open. Jack's cigar rolled off the table. Emma, if you're watching this, sweetheart, I want you to know. You're the future. Don't let them bully you. You have the key. You know what to do. The screen went black. Silence reigned for a long moment. Then Laura erupted. This is outrageous. He was sick. He was being manipulated. That child, she's 10. This can't be real. But Mr. Bennett was already opening another folder. This, he said firmly, is the notarized final version of Mr. Thompson's will, including codicils, signed with 3 witnesses, all verified. He laid it flat on the table for all to see. And this, he said, pulling out yet another paper, is the video affidavit of sound mental state, conducted 2 days before the recording. I sat, frozen. Emma squeezed my hand again. Her face was calm, serene. Laura surged to her feet. You think I'm letting some washed-up teacher and her little bastard take my inheritance? I rose before I realized I was moving. Don't you ever call her that again. My voice was quiet. Too quiet. Laura took a step back. Jack stood too, but not to support her. He raised his hands. I want no part of this mess, he muttered, and stormed out the door. Emma walked over to the desk and picked up the silver key that had slid across it earlier. She held it up, then looked at me. I think this goes to Grandpa's writing desk, she said. He told me he left one last surprise. I nodded slowly. My voice wouldn't work yet. As the others shouted, argued, and tried to reclaim the narrative, I realized something. This wasn't just a win. It was a message. Grandpa hadn't just seen me. He'd believed in me. And more importantly, he'd believed in her, my daughter. The 10-year-old with the courage to speak when I couldn't. The one who turned the tide with a single envelope. The key clinked softly as she slipped it into her pocket. And for the first time in decades, I felt like the house, the legacy, finally belonged to someone who'd earned it. To us. The screen had barely gone dark before the shouting began. That video is a setup, Laura shrieked, knocking over her glass. This is all some elaborate scam. He was manipulated, drugged maybe. He wasn't in his right mind. Mr. Bennett didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly placed a thick document folder on the table and opened it with deliberate care. The rustle of paper cut through the chaos like a blade. This, he said, tapping the top page, is the final legal will of Michael Thompson, dated 3 weeks prior to his passing. Here's the signature. Witnesses. A video affidavit conducted under supervision. Your father knew what he was doing, Ms. Thompson. Laura's mouth worked furiously, but no words came out. Jack stood stiffly in the corner, silent for once, arms crossed like a punished schoolboy. He avoided everyone's eyes. I sat still, my hands resting in my lap. Emma curled into my side. She hadn't said a word since the video played, but I could feel the warmth of her small body against mine, a quiet reminder of the truth we both carried. The truth Grandpa had hidden until now. Mr. Bennett flipped through the will, reading aloud the revised terms. To Sarah Thompson, the primary residence, the Hill Country Estate, all personal effects, and exclusive ownership of the Elm Root Trust. This includes mineral rights, unclaimed land in Arizona, and a liquid fund totaling $2 million. He paused and then looked up at me. Your name was always there, Ms. Thompson. He just wanted to be sure it stayed. Laura's chair screeched against the hardwood floor as she stood. This is insane. I've worked in that company for 15 years. I was his only daughter. You were his heir, I said softly, until you stopped acting like family. She glared at me, her face contorting with disbelief. You think you deserve this? You who walked away, who got knocked up and ruined everything. Before I could reply, Emma stood. I think he gave it to the people who loved him back, she said. Everyone turned. Emma's voice was clear, calm, far too steady for a 10-year-old in a room full of angry adults. But she wasn't afraid. Not now. When Grandpa came to the park last spring, she continued, he brought me sunflower seeds. He said they reminded him of Grandma. We sat on the bench near the duck pond. He told me a story about when he and Mom used to garden together. Then he gave me a letter and said, only open this if your mama looks sad. My throat tightened. Laura blinked rapidly. You're telling me a 10-year-old is holding this whole family hostage with park bench fairy tales? She's telling you the truth, Mr. Bennett said quietly. He pulled out another document from his case, a sworn affidavit signed by Michael, detailing his meeting with Emma and his intentions regarding the revised will. He trusted her, the lawyer continued. In fact, he told me explicitly, Emma sees the good in people. If she says they forgot fairness, then they did. Laura staggered back like she'd been slapped. This can't be happening, Jack finally spoke. You knew he wasn't happy with the board anymore. He told us all. Maybe we should have listened instead of, I don't know, treating them like ghosts. For a moment, no one moved. For a moment, no one moved. Then Emma walked to the large desk behind Mr. Bennett and gently set the silver key on top of it. She looked at me. Should we see what it opens? I nodded, and together we approached the old desk. The key slid into the lock with a soft click. Inside was a single velvet-lined box and an envelope with my name, Sarah, written in that same familiar scrawl. My fingers trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. Sarah girl, I wish I had told you this when I had the strength. You were always the one with heart. I let pride get in the way. That was my failure, not yours. I met Emma in the park because I needed to see hope again, and I found it in her eyes. This house, the land, the money, they're just things. But you're my legacy. Love, Grandpa. I didn't cry. Not yet. But something cracked open in my chest. Not pain, not grief. Relief. Real, aching, healing relief. In the velvet box was a locket. Inside it, a photo of me at 8 years old, sitting on Grandpa's lap, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. On the opposite side, a newer photo. Emma from last year's school portrait. 2 generations, one bond. Behind me, Laura's sobs finally broke through. She collapsed into the chair, face buried in her hands. I didn't know he still cared about you. I thought he forgot you. I turned to her. No, I said gently. You just never asked. Emma came to stand by me, slipping her hand into mine. In that moment, the room felt different, like the storm had passed. Not fully, not forever, but enough to let sunlight in through the shutters. Mr. Bennett cleared his throat. There's nothing more to read, unless you'd like to see what else the desk holds. I looked at the drawers. One remained locked, smaller, inlaid with a strange insignia. Emma tilted her head. I think that's for another time. And maybe it was. Grandpa had left us the truth, and perhaps a few more secrets. But this one was enough for today. The silence that followed Grandpa's letter lingered, thick and heavy like fog after a storm. Laura stood abruptly, her chair toppling backward and slamming into the hardwood. Her face was pale, her mascara smudged from unshed tears she'd never admit were there. I'm not staying here for this circus, she muttered. Her voice cracked. Keep your dusty house and your moral high ground. She grabbed her purse, almost dropped it, and without another word stormed out of the study. Her heels clacked angrily against the floor, then faded into nothing. Jack watched her go, chewing the end of his cigar like it was the only thing holding him together. Then, with a sudden motion, he snapped it in half. The 2 pieces fell to the floor like broken promises. She was always the favorite, he said bitterly, but there was no fight left in his voice. Just years of regret wrapped in resignation. I thought this place would go up in flames before it went to you. It almost did, I replied quietly. He didn't answer, just turned, adjusted his coat, and left without looking back. The rest of the room, the cousins, the distant aunts and uncles, were strangely quiet. A few offered awkward nods. One even mumbled something that might have been sorry. But none of them mattered anymore. Mr. Bennett gave me a tired but genuine smile. He loved you, he said simply. He just didn't know how to show it until the end. I nodded, words catching in my throat. My hand found Emma's again. She hadn't let go once. We left not long after. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. As I buckled Emma into the passenger seat of our old Toyota, she looked up at me, her eyes bright. Are we going home now? She asked. I hesitated. The house, the big, looming estate, technically was ours now. But home? Home was wherever she was. Yes, I said softly. We're going home. The road away from the Thompson estate was lined with oak trees and dusty memories. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was driving away from something. I was driving toward something better. Halfway down the road, I heard a small sniff from the back seat. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Emma was staring out the window, her expression unreadable. Hey, I said gently. You okay? She turned, her voice soft. You're crying, Mommy. I hadn't even noticed, but sure enough, tears were slipping down my cheeks, not from sadness, from relief, from the ache of finally being seen. Yeah, I whispered. It's just, Grandpa loved us. I didn't think he did. Not anymore. Emma smiled, reaching out to wipe one of my tears with her sleeve. I knew he was good. I just think he forgot how to be. I couldn't speak after that. So we drove in silence, hand in hand, through the twilight. If you'd asked me a week ago what legacy meant, I'd have said money, or property, or some dusty family name etched in granite. I would have told you it belonged to the ones who stayed, the ones who obeyed. But I was wrong. Legacy isn't about who gets what when someone dies. It's about who you were to the people who mattered. It's about truth. Quiet, unshakable, inconvenient truth that survives beyond money and masks. My daughter reminded me of that. I spent so long believing I was erased, cut out, forgotten. But it turns out love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's tucked in envelopes, hidden behind sunflower seeds and secret park benches, spoken only when the wolves bare their teeth. And now? Now we start again, on our terms. Maybe that old house will become something new, filled with laughter, not legacies. Maybe I'll plant sunflowers in the garden where the roses used to be. Maybe Emma will find the rest of the letters Grandpa never got to send. Or maybe we'll just sit on the porch and listen to the wind move through the trees. Sometimes that's enough. And to anyone who's ever felt forgotten, pushed aside, silenced, let me tell you this. Sometimes the ones who speak the least carry the greatest truth. And sometimes the smallest voices, like my daughter's, shake the world. Have you ever faced injustice from the people closest to you? Has the truth ever been buried beneath someone else's lies? If so, I hope our story reminded you. Good people don't always shout, but they always shine through. Eventually. If you've lived something like this, tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where goodness wins, even when the odds are stacked against it. Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a robe. Sometimes she's 10 years old holding a letter,